Now that we've looked at construction and how an equation is built, created, we're going to figure out how to deconstruct it. So ultimately, we want to know what the value of the variable is that makes this, keeps this equation to be true. Whatever is on the left side, this expression is equivalent to the value of 11, so we need to know what x is going to be to make this true. So first we want to look at the construction story of this. So x is added by 2. The sum is multiplied by 3. And the product is subtracted by 1. Leaving us with the result is 11. So when we begin our deconstruction story, we're undoing what we did in order for the construction to occur. So we start with the result. So in this case, the result is 11. So we start with 11. And instead of subtracting, because we're moving up this table, or this list of things, instead of subtracting, we know that subtraction, in order to deconstruct subtraction, we are going to add. And we're going to add the value of 1. When we do that, we're going to be left with a product. And that product is a multiplication problem, and so now we know we're going to have to divide by 3. And when we divide by 3, we're left with a sum. And in order for the sum to disappear, if you will, we need to subtract 2. And this will leave us with x, which is what we're going to want to find out what the value of the variable is, what the value of x is. So now that we've written our deconstruct story, we can use our deconstruct story to actually solve the equation and find out what the value of x is. And so we want to look at starting, so we rewrite the problem so we can have it written out for us. And we look, so we're starting with 11, so that's what the statement says. And we add 1. And when we add 1, we again know that this is going to be a product. And that product sits right here in our equation. And so when we add 1, we know that we're left with a product. And so that product is 3 times the quantity of x plus 2. And again, from our webs, we know that that change of addition of 1 is going to mean that our result is now equal to 12. So we know that the product is equal to 12. Where this difference was equal to 11, now the product is equal to 12. Next it says to divide by 3. So when we divide by 3, we know that we're going to be left with a sum. And that sum sits right in here inside those parentheses. And so now we know when we're going to divide by 3, we're going to be left with the sum. And so here's our sum. And again, from our web, that change of the division of 3 means that the sum must have equaled 4. Lastly, we are simply left with our variable. And our variable happened through an addition, and now we know that all we're going to have to do is leave with our variable, and we subtract 2, and we know that our variable has the value of 2. And then we want to make sure that we check our answers. It's always important that we check. So we're going to take 3 times 2 plus 2 minus 1, and we want to determine if that is equivalent to 11. So we have 3 times 4 minus 1 equals 11. And 12 minus 1, sure in fact, is 11, so that checks. And you notice here same thing is happening. We have these values, 3 times 4. We know that that product was 12. We know that the sum was 4. And we know that the entire equation is 11. Okay, here's a second problem, a very similar problem. So just take a minute, pause the video, and take a minute and write your own construction story based on what you see here. Okay, we have our construction story, so now we're going to write our deconstruct story, and our deconstruct story is that we're going to start with 9. And then we are going to, we had to multiply by -3, so that means now we're going to divide by -3. And we subtracted 5, so now we're going to add 5. We divided by 2, so that means we're going to multiply by 2, and that's going to give us the value of a. And so now in our solve process, again, we start with the equation. And this time we know that we have a difference. And so that difference sits right here. And we are going to divide by -3, which will leave us with that difference. And so we know our difference is a divided by 2 minus 5. And that difference is now equal to, or equivalent to, -3. Next, we know that we have a quotient, and here is our quotient. And so we have to add 5, and we're left with the quotient. And so that quotient is left, and when we add 5, we end up with 2. And then lastly, we are going to end up with a because we divided by 2. And so now we're going to multiply by 2. We're going to be left with a, and a is equal to 4. Let's check this real quick. If I plug in 4 here, is -3 times the quantity 4 divided by 2 minus 5. Is that in fact equal to 9? 4 divided by 2 is 2. We have -3 times -3, which is equal to 9.